Welcome to episode number 50 of How to Homeschool in High School and episode number 1 of the new rebranded How to Homeschool in High School 2.0, the Fearlessly Different podcast. So today is a big day in the life of the podcast. Not only is it episode 50 of How to Homeschool in High School, it is the first official episode of our rebranded show, the Fearlessly Different podcast. And today we're going to dive into the reasons why I decided to rebrand, what this new title means, and what this means for my content and the future of the rest of this year and into the next year. What does this mean for the future of the podcast? So without further ado, let's dive into it. So I just want to take a moment before we actually start the content of the episode to welcome our YouTube audience. If you are watching on YouTube, you have noticed this is a live, I recorded this episode. This is the first time I've done video and audio together. So if you're on, Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you're wondering, what does this look like? You can come look. It's nothing fancy. It's literally my basement and our amazing bookshelves behind me with all our school stuff. Those are literally all of our binders that we've used over the years. And those ones up here too. They're all our school binders. They're lovely. We should make, I don't know, inserts so you can read on the the book binding to tell what year they are, but they're my sisters and mine together. So this is a nice little backdrop, but it's not very organized. Hopefully we'll get more sophisticated as we go along, but we're here. We're on YouTube. We're live. We have a video, which is step number 1. So we've succeeded. This will be hopefully a common theme through the next few episodes of this new podcast. I'm hoping to have video and audio together. It's a little more fun, just adds a different level. So that's exciting. That's the first exciting thing. But let's get back to the main point of this episode today. So what in the world just happened? I mean, if you opened your podcast app and you were scrolling and you're like, oh, I don't follow this podcast. What is Fearlessly Different? So I've decided, and this started back in January, whenever I really started to think about the fact that I was a senior and I was graduating high school, even as much as I didn't want to. I finally let it sink in, and my family started asking me if I was going to rebrand the podcast. And for a while I was thinking, oh no, right? I don't have to rebrand the podcast for a few reasons, because I'm so passionate about encouraging high school homeschoolers. I didn't think that was going to change, and it hasn't changed. But I am no longer a high school student, which was a large part of my podcast. So that was when the question first started to really, I started to mess around with the question. That's when it happened. And it was really the convention, when we attended Great Homeschool Conventions in April, when I really started thinking about rebranding, because I realized my title was slightly misleading in a few different ways, and I'll walk through them right now for you guys. But first of all, it's almost exactly 2 years since the first time I wrote down the ideas I had for the podcast. It was August 4th of 2022 when I wrote in my little journal that I started thinking of names. And there were quite a few that I really liked. But for some reason, I don't really remember why, I landed up on How to Homeschool in High School, and I chose that one. So it served me well for these past 2 years. But at the convention, I realized I was getting parents coming up to me asking me, okay, how do you do it? Maybe at least 2 or 3 parents did that. And I was a little overwhelmed. How do you homeschool high school? And I'm well, that's a little bit more complicated than an answer I can just give you, in a few minutes. And also, there's no one way to do high school. That's the whole point of the podcast. If you guys been around for a while, you know that. It's been to allow us and encourage us to pursue our individuality through our education. So there's no one way to do high school. And I presented the name How to Homeschool in High School implies a certain technicality. Here are the steps of how to homeschool through high school. And I started out the podcast with a mini series of introducing the steps, to dropping out of public school and starting homeschooling. That was when my audience, I thought, was going to be public school students who wanted to learn more about homeschooling, until I realized that there's a lot of homeschoolers out there who needed encouragement. And so I did that series, and it lasted 7 episodes. That was it. And I was like, okay, well, that's all the how to homeschool and high school stuff I can do. Because I'm not an educational expert, nor do I claim to be one. So I don't really know all this technical stuff. And there are quite a few podcasts out there. I will link them in the show notes if you're interested, that literally tell you step-by-step instructions on transcripts, instructions on the legal side of it, the curriculum side of it. And I tried my very best to be a voice in the high school homeschooling world and to get as much advice and encouragement out there as I possibly could. But I could never be a place. And I realized this at the convention, where you get all the technicality, and that wasn't who I was. Like that's not who I am. My heart is with the students as well as the parents. And I want to be a voice of encouragement. And that is what I tried to do through how to homeschool in high school. Because if I learned one lesson over the past 2 years, it has been that to overcome the fear of missing out when it comes to homeschooling, we have to be confident in who we are. And we have to be confident in the reasons why we're choosing homeschooling. And we have to understand a little bit better the movement we're a part of, because it's a pretty amazing movement that we are part of. So all of that to say that in June, it was actually in June, I was going back and forth. I was like, no, I'm rebranding. And then I was like, no, I'm definitely not rebranding. So it was like back and forth, back and forth. This was a very deliberated? No. Oh my goodness. This was heavily debated in my mind about what I should do about this. Because obviously you guys are my first priority, and I cannot thank you enough that over the past 2 years, you've been an incredible audience. We've grown significantly over the past few months, so I know there's a lot of new listeners, but I wouldn't be here without you guys. You've made this podcast. So the front of my mind, I was like, how can I best serve my audience? There is a lot of technical podcasts out there for parents to listen to, but there's nothing for teens. There's nothing for students, whether that be college age or high school age, to listen and be encouraged. And parents can listen as well and be encouraged, but there's nothing like that out there. So how can I make that happen? Because I do feel like that is where I'm being led. That's where I'm being called. And I arrived at the decision through much deliberating. I can't talk. What is the word? Much Alexa? Contemplation. That's the word. Contemplation. Through much contemplation, I arrived at the conclusion that I would be best able to accomplish my new goal by rebranding the podcast. That was Alexa. Sorry. Through rebranding the podcast. So that is what we're doing. We are rebranding How to Homeschool in High School. And so that is the reason, that's some of the reasoning behind the decision. I want to really focus in on being a voice of encouragement for students and less on the actual steps to homeschooling through high school, because I also, this is another reason, want to expand my audience for college age students. So no longer are we explicitly, and that is the very key word there, explicitly, we are still very much going to be talking about high school homeschooling. I'm not leaving that audience behind, nor am I leaving that topic behind, because I do believe high school has been some of my favorite years of homeschooling, and I will continue to encourage that community as long as I possibly can until the Lord calls me out of it, because my heart is with the high school homeschoolers, but I also want to include the college age students in that, because I am now going to be in college, and the college world right now is absolutely insane. College is crazy. People are talking about college being a scam now, and there's just this whole thing going on with what is college should be. What are we going to do about higher education? What direction are we going? What are alternatives to college? And we've been exploring some of those on the podcast lately. So I want to include college age students in this, because we are also on a path of as homeschoolers, let me put it this way. As homeschoolers, we are set apart in our education. We've chosen to be set apart. Our parents have chosen for us. When we enter when we enter college, our decision to be set apart is largely on us. And how can we encourage each other to continue to pursue a Christ-centered education, continue to pursue a set-apart path? And I think we need all the encouragement we can get, especially when it comes to college, because people and society are very loud in saying that you're going to miss out on an experience, you're going to miss out on success, so many different things. And I feel strongly that that audience also needs to be included in there, because as high schoolers, we're headed there. We're all headed there. Even as elementary school students, that's all our future. So stopping the conversation in high school is not enough. We need to continue the conversation through high school as well, especially in the shifting education world and all the indoctrination that's going on. It's absolutely insane. So with this rebranding in mind, I'm also expanding my audience to start talking about college a little bit more, since I am going to be a college student. And not just college, but alternatives to college. That's trade school, that's programs like Unbound and Praxis. Like, this is going to be really fun. I have not looked forward to podcasting more than I am looking forward to this next semester of content. So that moves us really well into my next point for this episode, which was, what does the new title and what does the new mission really mean for the podcast? So the new title, Fearlessly Different. If you've been around for a while, you've heard me use that phrase at the end of episodes, and I don't remember the first time I used it. I think it was well into the podcast's life when I first started realizing that we needed to be more confident in who we were, and the point of homeschooling was to be different. So how can we approach that difference fearlessly? And that's when I started using that phrase, and it's kind of stuck. It's been fun. I've enjoyed using it because I do feel like it encompasses what the podcast is trying to communicate. So when we were trying to figure out rebranding and a new title, my parents were like, "Hey, but what about Fearlessly Different?" Because that's what you say all the time, and it connects you very well to where you were, how to homeschool in high school. It's a very nice connection. So I decided that was perfect, and we got the new cover art and everything. And so the mission has also changed. So at the beginning of every episode, I usually say, "Welcome to How to Homeschool in High School, the podcast focused on encouraging and equipping you to homeschool through high school, successfully, hosted by a homeschool teen, or high school teen," both of which I am no longer. It is so sad. I know. I am grieving that I'm no longer a homeschooler, but I'll always be a homeschooler at heart. I will always be a homeschooler at heart. My education will always be rooted at home, so I think that makes me a homeschooler forever. Yes, I do. Anyway, so I decided that our new mission for the podcast is going to be, no, it's very similar. It's still encouraging and still equipping you to homeschool through high school, but it's also encouraging and equipping you to view education a little differently, to view college a little differently. So I think what I've landed upon over the past weeks of just thinking all this over is encouraging a generation of fearless students. We have never needed, well, we have probably in the past, but in the history of our country, it's very important, it's very vital right now for us to have courageous students and courageous educators and courageous parents. Because school right now is looking more crazy than ever, and we are choosing a very different path, and that's going to get a lot of backlash. It's going to get some hatred. It's going to get some misconceptions, some stereotypes. So how can we approach this different way of school fearlessly, confidently, trusting the Lord to provide for every step of the way and for every need that we have? And it's important that we are fearless in that choice, because we have no idea the impact we're going to have, not only on our community, but the future homeschoolers. So it is vital that we be confident in who we are. And that really does change not only your impact on others, like I'd mentioned, but also the experience you have daily with homeschooling and the experience you have daily with life after high school. What I realize with students who are choosing a different path, an alternative to college, is sometimes we get stuck comparing ourselves, and this also includes high school students who are choosing to homeschool through high school. We get stuck comparing ourselves to this other version of ourselves in the system and what they're experiencing, whatever. Here is the deal. Life is what you make out of it, and we have many opportunities as homeschoolers. You have many opportunities if you choose not to go to high school, choose not to go to college. Sorry. And if we're so focused on the small sliver of what we don't have, we're going to miss out on what God has laid before us. As we're choosing to trust Him with our education and choosing to not just go with the flow, but actually understand that our education is molding us and shaping us to become people. So people we're surrounded by, the ideas that are being put in our head are so vital to our development. And we start taking that very seriously instead of just looking at everyone else and thinking, oh, they're doing something. We realize education is the molding of the student. We are being guided in a direction. What does that direction mean? Does that direction honor God? Those are big questions, right? And so when we choose to address those questions, when we choose to face them, that takes a lot of courage. You're not alone in facing those questions. But whenever something is put on our heart to maybe do something differently, we have to do it without looking at everyone else around us and running the race that has been set before us. And I do feel like we can do that when we realize, one, we are not alone in this different experience, and two, there's so many beautiful things for us to explore and to experience, and that can be through the stories of others, which are so vital and important. And just hearing about different programs that are offered for us and realizing our opportunities are abundant and they're ever growing. The Lord provides. So I want this place, the podcast, to be a place first and foremost of encouragement, to pursue a different path. And I want this to be a place where we as students can encourage each other and challenge each other to stop looking at everyone else and start focusing on what God has called us into and where He's leading us and where the people around us are encouraging us to go. So it is a place to encourage students to be fearless in their different choice of schooling. And that can be high school, that can be college. This also includes parents, though. We are also including parents in this to continue to choose the different path of education through high school as well, because high school is so fun and so important. And they've been my favorite years of homeschooling. So the new title and the new mission, they're very much in line with what we used to be. So I do not intend on changing my content drastically. If you're wondering, what is this new podcast going to look like? And is it going to be crazy different from How to Homeschool in High School? The answer is no. I'm not going to start talking about hot dogs all day long. I don't know why I chose hot dogs. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. It's still very much going to be about homeschooling and education and the student and the parent and everything. And we're still going to be interviewing homeschool curriculum developers. Like, I'm not going to stop doing that. We're also going to be interviewing students. Like, the content that I have been doing over the past few months is pretty much the content of this new podcast. I have been slowly, ever so slightly, just directing the podcast in that direction already. So it's not going to be a huge change. We're not changing course. Like, it's just we're continuing down this path more directly. And I love this new title because it does include other ways of schooling beyond homeschooling. So that could be more co-ops, that could be online schooling, that could be trade school, like students who are choosing a different path. This is the place to be encouraged. That is what I want. So we are, to be more specific, encouraging students to be fearless in our choice to pursue a Christ-centered and a Christ-honoring education. And that includes parents who are choosing to pursue that for their students. So it is a movement we're a part of. It is a growing movement. It is an exciting movement. It is a return to the classic education and the cultivating of the mind, body, and spirit and soul of the student. And it is a beautiful thing to be a part of. And I cannot wait for this next chapter of How to Homeschool in High School. I think it's going to be super fun. So why do I think it's going to be super fun? What do we have to look forward to over the next few months? So I have been stocking up on interviews. I've been doing them like crazy because I know my schedule is going to be crazy as a college student. I am planning on going to college next semester, and as much as I'm going to be talking about college alternatives and different paths for choosing college, I'm also going to be talking about college. So there are a lot of colleges out there, I think, maybe not a lot, a few of them who are standout and they're choosing to follow the different path themselves. And I believe Grove City College to be one of those colleges. So we're going to be talking about life as a homeschooler in college as well, as long with everything that we're doing. But we're also talking with a lot of curriculum developers and a lot of students. I recently interviewed a friend of mine who's a trade school student, and she did a fantastic job of explaining trade school, her experience there, why she recommends it to other people. So we're going to listen to that. And then I have a few of my friends who came on talked about their play experience, putting on a production as a homeschooler. What does that look like? There are so many different things coming in the next few weeks, but ultimately it is just a place of courageous students who are choosing to do choosing to do education differently. And this is the place where they can be encouraged and connected to other students who are doing the exact same thing. So that is the purpose and the intent of the podcast. I also will be throwing in there maybe some current events, things that are going on in education that you might want to know as a student, personally, that I find interesting and important, because our education slowly through the course of high school does become our own. It becomes our responsibility, and especially as we enter the world of potentially college, it is up to us to get our stuff done. It is up to us to be motivated. So having that perspective of this belongs to me. This is my initiative. This is my future. And education is so vital. It doesn't just last the years you're in high school and elementary school and middle school. It lasts through your whole life. So it is very important for us, I think, to be involved in our education and to be proactive in our education. So we're going to be talking about all that, and we're going to still get practical, like study tips and just procrastination, overcoming that. Like all these things are going to be continued that we've done throughout homeschool and high school in the past. So that is a sneak peek into the content that we're going to be coming out with over the next few months. Like I said, I'm going to plan very hard to be faithful in every week releasing a new episode. It might be more like every 2 weeks if I'm being realistic. Also have a YouTube channel along with the audio portion of the podcast. So if you're interested in watching on YouTube, hop on there. So this is the new chapter of how to homeschool in high school. It is exciting. It is different. I was a little scared to come up here and do this podcast, because whenever you make a change like this, there's always risk involved, obviously. So, but I think in this way, we are being led in a direction I think we can really go far. And it is very exciting. So I just wanted to take a moment here at the end to thank my audience. And I think I did this a little earlier in the episode, but I want to do it again. Especially you guys who have been around, and I'm talking to my close friends here who constantly encouraged me when I did the first episode. I think it's called What is Homeschooling? We'll have to react to that maybe one day and listen to it. I have a hard time listening to it. Anyway, you guys have stuck around since the beginning. You've encouraged me since the beginning, and I just wanted to thank you. And even those of you who are relatively new to the podcast, thank you for listening to this episode. I hope that this podcast continues to stay as helpful and encouraging as possible. If you know any students in your life, or if you have friends who need a bit of encouragement to continue homeschooling, need a bit of encouragement to continue down the different path they're choosing after high school, maybe encouraged to continue to stay sane in this college world that we're experiencing right now, this is the podcast for you. So please share whatever you think would be helpful to them. And please let me know what you think of this new change by emailing me. My new email address is linked in the show notes. If you want to reach out, give me some advice, what you think about the podcast, anything you want to hear me talk about in the next few weeks, be sure to do that. I want to, as always, continue to make this podcast as helpful for you guys as I can. So I'm going to leave you guys with this verse that I have actually been clinging to over the past few months as I rebranded the podcast, as I got over my fear of recording, which I do have a fear of recording for some reason. Listening to my voice, editing myself is not my favorite thing to do in the world, but I have been reminding myself of this verse as I went through all this. Joshua 1:9, it's very well known. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And while this verse applies to pretty much anything you do, it also applies to how we do school. And I think it was my pastor who said, why does the Lord continue to have to say, be strong and courageous to Joshua? Because he's continually weak and afraid. And I think sometimes we can feel weak and afraid. As I transition from high school to college, I have a lot of moments of fear and a lot of moments of weakness, even when I'm doing this podcast. And when I was homeschooling, there was a lot of moments of fear and a lot of moments of weakness. But with the Lord, the key to this verse is that He is with us wherever you go. And He is with us wherever we go. So if we continue to, I think, cling to that promise that He is with us, He will guide us, especially when we're rededicating, we're returning our trust in our education to Him. He will be with us wherever we go. And that is such an important promise to cling to. So I will leave you guys with the hope that as we trust in Him, we will be strong and courageous in our choice. We'll be fearlessly different in our education. And I will see you guys